there has been a lot of discourse about the makeup of the Jets' top six right now, post Sean Monahan. And the funny thing is, Monahan hasn't really been a big part of most of those discussions. It's surrounding Kyle Connor, it's surrounding Nikolai Ehlers, and it is surrounding Cole Perfetti. Just recent, like, let's go back to this last week based on the good and the bad that we've seen. How are you feeling about both lines right now, where they're at going into practice tomorrow and Friday's game against Chicago?
I think that they're not particularly working, and yet they're scoring. Most of that's on the power play, and almost all of that is the top line as a result, although obviously Monahan on that second line at even strength. I think at 5-on-5, they genuinely have not been good. You heard Gabriel Velarde say that. You heard Rick Bowness say that. I'll tell you that too. And I think the thing that I've learned in this last week, or had reminded to me more than anything, it's something I've always known, but it's just really getting hammered home right now. Public perception depends on pucks going in the net. So, for example, the top line, I think, largely is getting love, though there are critics who don't like their defensive metrics. And I think a lot of that, I'm not going to point to every place that you're hearing about how great they are, but a lot of that is because the puck's going in for them. And, Connor gets his 5-on-5 goal. The power play production has been there. And the defensive miscues don't get talked about as much, I think. Perfetti and Ehlers are eating it right now. And I went back to sort of just check, because I was playing hockey on Saturday. Let's watch the shifts isolated and just go zoom in on it. Just check to see how bad Perfetti and Ehlers were on Saturday against Vancouver. And the thing that I learned was that, yeah, they were bad. They did struggle to get the puck out of their blue line. They did struggle to keep the puck in deep. They were worthy of criticism defensively based on puck management in that game. And every once in a while, it didn't just look like a bad decision, but there were mistakes in execution that looked clumsier than either of those players traditionally looked. That was a game that deserved criticism from them. You also look at Kyle Connor chasing Tyler Myers very half-heartedly after Gabriel Velarde gives Myers the puck on a stretch pass through the middle of the ice on the breakout, and that puck goes in. But because the top line produces, you don't hear that same level of criticism. And I think there's two things that I take away from that. One is, okay, yeah, if you want to make any complaints about ice time or getting minutes, and certainly Perfetti and Ehlers have not gotten a lot of minutes. Their minutes are going down. If you want to complain, you got to produce. You have to outscore whatever you're giving up, and they're not doing that. They deserve some criticism for that. That's for real. Connor and Scheifele and Velarde are producing, so that makes up for that. Great. That is known. But Winnipeg needs better from both of those lines in so many ways if they're going to return to that top-tier defensive team and pretty good offensive team that they've been so far.
Yeah, I mean, using the Vancouver example, and I'm with you. I mean, it was not a strong game for Ehlers and Perfetti, but the Kyle Connor play on the Myers goal was such a tough look. I mean, a tough enough look that at the intermission, the broadcast isolated Connor with the big blue thing around him as he sort of watched Myers go in. And I do wonder what was either said on the bench or potentially at the intermission to that line, because, obviously they had that great goal to put them ahead where Scheifele took the hit, the beautiful pass from Connor to the tap into Velarde, and then the insurance goal. Mark has a huge game with 1 goal and 3 assists, and Connor, gets on the score sheet a couple times in that third period. And I had to think that the feelings post-game, what the coach had to say, might have been significantly different, or maybe should have been significantly different. We don't know what it would have been if the line didn't sort of, in particular, Connor, sort of get a little bit of redemption by doing what he's paid to do, and that is put up offense.
Yeah, that's it. If you're going to be porous defensively, outscore it. And they did, and they won that game. And that deserves credit, right? It's not all about process and underlying numbers and where the game gets played and all of that. You got to score. You got to put the puck in the net. That's how you win. And they did it, and they won. The problem is when you zoom out and you want to look at that stretch run and say, hey, can Winnipeg beat top teams with its top line getting hemmed in its own zone? And no, they can't. They probably can't, I should say. It hasn't happened yet. The interesting thing, too, is that the Perfetti and Ehlers get sat down after that game on Monday, and they have a meeting with the coach, and it's about puck management. And I mean, that's absolutely true. They were poor in puck management on Saturday. But does that meeting happen in that same way if they're the ones who produced and led the team to the win? I'm not sure it does. Obviously, it probably doesn't. The top line scored, and that means that the perception changes completely, even though they were often hemmed in as well, just as they were often hemmed in yesterday, but the offense is there once again.
Well, let's just focus in on Ehlers and Perfetti for a minute. What do you make of the funk that both of those players are in? I mean, they are offensive players. There hasn't been a lot of offense, and like there was a few points last night where they just seemed disconnected at times, and Ehlers, even some of the things that are normally very simple things for him to do, just didn't seem to be clicking lately. Is this just a slump in the middle of the season?
Yeah, I mean, there would be a little bit of that for sure. Like, you can point to Perfetti scoring chances in recent times. I'll just isolate on him because I can see, in my memory's mind right now, I can see the scoring chances. I can see Sean Monahan stealing the puck early on in the offensive zone against Calgary. Was it Calgary? Yes, it was Calgary. Cole Perfetti drives the net and has a wraparound attempt stuffed. I can see Perfetti driving the lane leading up to Monahan's rebound goal. I don't know that he got a stick on the puck to deflect it, but it hit the Flames defender who was on Perfetti in that moment. So he's doing the right thing. Perfetti got kind of criticized for getting rocked, I think, a couple of times against Vancouver. But one of the things that happens right after that is he rushes up the ice for a scoring chance, gets a slap shot off. Again, against Calgary, after getting a heavy hit, he rushes up the ice with Dylan Samberg. He puts a shot, I think it's through Markstrom's armpit, and it just trickles by the post and doesn't go in. It's the same shot Kyle Connor took on the power play that Monahan buried because it's the power play and he's right there on the net, but it doesn't go in. And so it's as if this guy isn't doing anything offensively. He hasn't produced anything offensively in an awfully long time. And that is a problem. It is a concern. It needs to get better. But when the puck is around the net and you're around the net, I think that he's playing better than the perception has. I just can't see, I'm not seeing a tremendous amount of chemistry between him and Nikolai Ehlers right now. They do waste pucks. And I think that when you see that, and at the end of the day, that there's zeros beside their name mostly, I know Ehlers got an assist, that is a concerning trend. It is something that needs to improve or change.
There's been plenty of folks, and I mean, listen, we have all these conversations and people fire out their takes on Twitter and all that, and it's all fun, and that's part of the discourse that we have as fans and people in the media. There's one person that counts in this equation, and that's Rick Bowness, because he is the shot caller on the bench. How do you think he views these players right now as to where they're at? And listen, we don't need to go down the long list of what Nikolai Ehlers has done for this club and how productive he's been in the past. But right now, and I think a word that you used in your latest piece, which is very key, is trust. Where is that, and how might it be distributed through those six forwards that are on the Jets' top two lines?
Yeah, and I kind of tee off on this in today's column, so please have a look, please have a read. I think Bowness is having some trouble right now, and I think it's because no one in that top six, if you accept that Scheifele and Monahan, those lines are the top six, those two lines are not defending well right now. Neither one of them is. One of them is producing offense. So you do need to try to win games. You do need that. If you have a choice between putting your foot on the pedal that gives minutes to the guys who are actually scoring while not defending well versus the guys who are not scoring or defending well, I think it's an easy decision. But overall, his sense of confidence in what he's got going on right now is not high. And you heard that in his postgame after Calgary. You heard that in his postgame last night where he sort of bit his tongue a little bit answering Connor's question about the top line's performance. That is a sign when this is a guy that'll tell you like it is, or he'll just say nothing or what have you. that he's not pleased with the two-way play of the Winnipeg Jets right now. And now, well, what do you do with that, right? Like he has to try to win games. So you can go back to Scheifele, Ehlers, and Vilardi, which won so much, or you can do with what the Jets are trying to do, and they're forcing a belief in Connor Scheifele, Vilardi based on their offensive ability and based on their preferences, in my opinion, that is not necessarily bearing itself out at 5-on-5. I have time for that because they're so good they could find it, but the reality is they don't have it right now. So Bowness is in a tough spot. Wait it out, see if it gets better, wait it out, see if it gets better, or make changes that end up splitting that line up. Maybe that means splitting Scheifele and Connor, who do want to play together, who Bowness does want to get 20 minutes a night. I think that if Bowness continues to treat that duo and that line as his biggest, most important priority, other things are going to get lost, and I get into that in the piece for sure.
Yeah, the piece is up at The Athletic right now. I know Remus just had it up on the show, and it's a very interesting title: Why the Winnipeg Jets forward deployment double standard threatens the team's foundation. Only one thing I would say on that, and I've we've talked about it before. I've got a lot of time for Nikolai Ehlers playing on that top line. I will say that to make a coach go that direction, you sort of do need to give them a reason to do. I mean, it can't just be remember what happened 2 months ago. I mean, there is an element of the present right now, and I kind of think that the challenge was maybe laid out to Nikolai Ehlers, and we're still waiting for it to be answered, to be, to show that, we're missing out having you on that line. And I would suggest that by, the way that he's played over the last little while, particularly this 3-game stretch that we're sort of focusing on, that hasn't been there. And until it shows up that way, I'm not sure that that's even a thought in Bowness's mind.
Yeah, you know what? I agree with that, because these decisions don't get made by robots. They don't get made by spreadsheets. They don't get made by the fact that Ehlers has led the Jets in points per minute for years, and the best years Winnipeg has ever had in terms of points per minute are basically him, Blake Wheeler, and Kyle Connor. Like, he's been an elite offensive producer, but he hasn't been for the last month. And, many Jets haven't been, but they're coming around. You have to respect the fact that human beings are playing here. Human beings are making the coaching decisions, and you have to give a person a reason that they can defend, a reason that they can believe in. And certainly Ehlers isn't tearing the cover off of the ball so much that there's no excuse to keep him off of the top line. That is a major part of what's going on, I think. I still think that even were Ehlers producing, I think Bowness prefers his top line the way that he has it. But again, I guess just repeating myself, it's not charts that make the decisions, it's people. And you got to convince people. If the argument isn't good, and to your point, it hasn't been, there you have it. Like, what are you going to, you're not going to get a reward to go back to a top line that used to work by playing in a way that ends up with tons of giveaways and no offense in the most recent. Like, you need a pretense to make that change.
Well, and the one thing I'll say is, sometimes changes are made for different reasons. Sometimes a guy is playing lower in the lineup and he's playing so well, you just have to get him out there more, and he sort of barges his way in and takes it. There are other times when everything is so messed up, it's maximum blender time and guys get moved up, and a guy may not be playing particularly well, and the next thing you know, he finds himself on the top line. I guess where we can get to is that, despite defensive structure has sort of been lost over this last couple games for sure, although Bowness is he had a lot of praise for the way his team played against the Vancouver Canucks, that if the top line wasn't scoring the way that they have been, and again, you make a great point that a bunch of it has been on the power play, but if they hadn't had those offensive results and we were still going through that middling time and the defense had fallen off, then at that point, pretty much anything is on the table. But until that happens with players on line 2 barging their way in, or it's completely off the rails on the top line, which I guess there might be someone that would argue that, but I think that the production at the end is what really matters to the coach on a given shift, on a given period, in a given night, that we're probably looking at status quo for a little while. And I do want to ask you about one thing when it comes to the second line, because I think Sean Monahan is there. I think Cole Perfetti is going to be there. When we talk about the options of Ehlers versus Kyle Connor, is Ehlers a better driver of a line himself? Like, how much of that do you think is part of the decision that, when everything is going well, Ehlers is a guy, maybe more so than Connor, despite Connor's gaudy goal numbers, that can be a guy that elevates his teammates and creates more as the offensive catalyst, which I think the idea is that he would be on line number 2, potentially with much more beneficial matchups, depending on whether you're at home.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle Connor, let's start with respect on his offensive production and the fact that as much as we can talk about Ehlers being a dominant 5-on-5 scorer, Connor's also really darned good, right? So like I want to make sure that what comes next is prefaced with that. But Connor comes in at the end of the play. Connor comes in as a finisher. Connor is a deadly sniper, and he sort of does depend on other players to do more of the work that gets the puck into that dangerous spot. He can be dangerous in transition. Ehlers is a player whose general impact, his biggest strength is to get the puck from one end of the ice to the other and then get across that blue line with speed. Once he gets across the blue line with speed, on an Ehlers bad day, he makes chaotic plays, the puck gets turned over, nothing happens. On an Ehlers good day, which the aggregate says there's way more of those, what he ends up doing by attacking with so much speed is he backs defenders off, he creates chaos, he makes decisions that confuse defenders and end up with players out of position, which opens up space for other players. It's why Ehlers, Scheifele, and Velarde outscored its opposition, didn't out-analytic its opposition. It ran rampant on the scoreboard against its opposition, in part because Ehlers opens up different looks in different lanes. Unpredictable can be good. Now, I think that Ehlers' unpredictability can also challenge line mates. And when they see him make a decision that is a bit confusing and it doesn't work, I think that does create a sense of chaos in a way that doesn't go right. And I think Connor's predictability and his elite finishing is why you've seen so many players argue for him on the top line over the years, like the famous Blake Wheeler, "Give me the kid," when Connor was a rookie. I think that type of thing has continued and played a big role in which one gets which minutes.